The Battle of Beersheba was fought on the 31st of October 1917, when the Egyptian Expeditionary Force attacked and captured the Yildirim Army Group garrison at Beersheba, beginning the Southern Palestine Offensive of the Sinai and Palestine campaign of World War I. After successful limited attacks in the morning by infantry from the 60th and the 74th Divisions of the 20th Corps from the southwest, the Anzac Mounted Division launched a series of attacks. These attacks, against the strong defenses which dominated the eastern side of Beersheba, eventually resulted in their capture during the late afternoon. Shortly afterwards, the Australian Mounted Division's 4th and 12th Light Horse Regiments conducted a mounted infantry charge with bayonets in the hands, their only weapon for mounted attack, as the rifles were slung across the backs, while part of the two regiments dismounted to attack entrenchments on Tel-Es Arbor defending Beersheba. The remainder of the light horsemen continued the charge into the town, capturing the place and part of the garrison as it was withdrawing. After the EEF defeats at the First and Second Battles of Gaza in March and April 1917, the victorious German General Friedrich Friedrich von Kressenstein further strengthened his defensive line stretching from Gaza to Beersheba, and received reinforcements of 2 divisions. Meanwhile, Lieutenant General Philip Chetwood began the stalemate in southern Palestine, defending more or less the same entrenched lines held at the end of the second battle, initiated regular mounted reconnaissance into the opened eastern flank of the Gaza to Beersheba line, towards Beersheba. In June, the Ottoman Fourth Army was reorganized when the new Yildirim Army Group was established, commanded by German General Erich von Falkenhayn. At about the same time, the British General Edmund Allenby replaced General Archibald Murray as commander of the EEF. Allenby reorganized the EEF to give him direct command of 3 corps, in the process deactivating Chetwood's eastern force and placing him in command of one of the 2 infantry corps. At the same time, Chauvel's Desert Column was renamed the Desert Mounted Corps. As the stalemate continued through the summer in difficult conditions on the northern edge of the Negev Desert, EEF reinforcements began to strengthen the divisions. While the primary functions of the EEF and the Ottoman Army during this time were to man the front lines and patrol the opened eastern flank, both sides conducted training of all units. By mid-October, while the Battle of Passchendaele continued on the western front, the 21st Corps maintained the defenses in the Gaza sector of the line. Further, Allenby's preparations for the maneuver warfare attacks on the Ottoman defensive line, beginning with Beersheba, and the subsequent advance to Jerusalem, were nearing completion with the arrival of the last reinforcements. Beersheba was defended by lines of trenches, supported by isolated redoubts on earthworks and hills which covered all approaches to the town. The Ottoman garrison was eventually encircled by the 2 infantry and 2 mounted divisions as they launched their attacks. The 60th Division's preliminary attack and capture of the redoubt on Hill 1070 led to the bombardment of the main Ottoman trench line. Then a joint attack by the 60th and 74th Divisions captured all their objectives. Meanwhile, to the northeast of Beersheba, the Anzac Mounted Division cut the road from Beersheba to Hebron. Continuous fighting against the main redoubt and defenses on Tel-Es Arbor resulted eventually in its capture in the afternoon. During this fighting, the 3rd Light Horse Brigade had been sent to reinforce the Anzac Mounted Division, while the 5th Mounted Brigade remained in Corps Reserve. With all brigades of both mounted divisions already committed to the battle, the only brigade available was ordered to capture Beersheba. These swordless mounted infantrymen galloped over the plain, riding towards the town and a redoubt supported by entrenchments on a mound of Tel-Es Arbor southeast of Beersheba. while the 4th Light Horse Regiment on the right jumped trenches before turning to make a dismounted attack on the Ottoman infantry. Most of the 12th Light Horse Regiment on the left rode on across the face of the main redoubt to find a gap in the Ottoman defences. These squadrons rode on across the railway line and into Beersheba, to complete the first step of an offensive which would see the EEF capture Jerusalem 6 weeks later. Background: after the second defeat at Gaza in April, General Archibald Murray sacked the commander of Eastern Force, Lieutenant General Charles Dobell. Lieutenant General Philip Chetwood was promoted to command Eastern Force, while Harry Chauvel was promoted to Lieutenant General with command of the Desert Column. Major General Edward Chater was promoted from the New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade to command the Anzac Mounted Division, replacing Chauvel. With the arrival of General Edmund Allenby in June, Murray was also relieved of command of the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, and sent back to England. Although the strategic priorities of Enver Pasha and the Ottoman General Staff were to push the EEF back to the Suez Canal and retake Baghdad, Mesopotamia and Persia, the EEF was fortunate that the victorious Ottoman forces were not in a position in April 1917 to launch a large-scale counterattack immediately after the second victory at Gaza. Such an attack against rudimentary EEF defenses on the northern edge of the Negev could have been disastrous for the EEF. Instead, both sides constructed permanent defenses stretching from the sea west of Gaza to Shalal on the Wadi Gazer. From Shalal, the lightly entrenched EEF line extended to El Gamli before continuing south 7 miles to Tel El Farah. The western sector was strongly entrenched, wide and defended by EEF and Ottoman infantry. The eastern sector, stretching east and south across the open plain, was patrolled by Desert Columns mounted infantry and yeomanry. At every opportunity, patrols and outposts harassed opposing forces, while wells and cisterns were mapped. The town of Gaza was strongly defended, having been developed into a strong modern fortress, well entrenched and wired, with good observation and a glacis on its southern and southeastern face. From Gaza, the formidable 30-mile-long Ottoman front line stretching eastwards dominated the country to the south, where the EEF was deployed in open, low-lying country cut by deep wadis. The Ottoman defences in the centre of the line, at Atawina and hairpin redoubts, supported each other as they overlooked the plain, making a frontal attack virtually impossible. Between Gaza and Harera, the Ottoman defences were strengthened and extended along the Gaza to Beersheba Road, east of the Palestine railway line from Beersheba. Although these trenches did not extend to Beersheba, strong fortifications made the isolated town into a fortress. The open eastern flank was dominated by the Wadi Gazer, which, at the beginning of the stalemate, could only be crossed in 5 places. These were at the mouth on the Mediterranean coast, the main Deir el-Bila to Gaza road crossing, the Tel el-Gemma crossing, the Shalal crossing on the Khan Yunis to Beersheba Road, and the Tel el-Farah crossing on the Rafah to Beersheba Road. The difficulty of crossing the Wadi elsewhere was due to the 50 to 60 feet perpendicular banks cut into the Gaza-Beersheba plain by regular floods. Additional crossings were constructed during the stalemate. Beersheba at the foot of the Judean hills was built on the eastern bank of the Wadi Es-Saba, which joins the Wadi Gazer at Bir el-Azani, before stretching to the Mediterranean Sea. Located at the northwest end of a flat, treeless plain about 4 miles long by 3 miles wide, the town is surrounded by rocky hills and outcrops. To the north-northeast, 6 miles away on the southern northern edge of the Judean hills. The Tuval Abu Jawal rises to 1,558 feet behind the town, overlooking it by 700 feet. Lower hills range east and south, with the spur of the plateau of Edom on the southeast, extending towards the town. Since ancient times, the town had been a trading center, with roads radiating from it in all directions. To the northeast, the only sealed metal motor road in the region stretched along a spine of the Judean hills to Jerusalem, Veredh, Hebron and Bethlehem, along the Wadi el-Khalil. To the northwest, the road to Gaza, 26 miles away, crossed the open plain. To the west, the track to Rafah via Tel el-Farah, while the southern road to Asluj and Hafir el-Ayu continued the metalled road from Jerusalem. Beersheba was developed by the Ottoman Empire from a camel trading center on the northern edge of the Negev, halfway between the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea. It was on the railway line which ran from Istanbul to Hafir el-Ayu, and which was damaged beyond repair in May 1917 during an EEF raid. Beersheba's hospital, army barracks, railway station, engine sheds, large storage buildings, and a square of houses were well-designed and strongly constructed stone buildings, with red-tiled roofs and a German beer garden. The inhabitants of the region from Beersheba northwards varied. The population was mainly Arabs belonging to Sunni Islam, with some Jewish and Christian colonists. The EEF had already decided to invade Ottoman territory before the First Battle of Gaza on the basis of Britain's three major war objectives: to maintain maritime supremacy in the Mediterranean, preserve the balance of power in Europe, and protect Egypt, India and the Persian Gulf. Despite the EEF's defeats during the first two battles of Gaza, Allenby planned an advance into Palestine and the capture of Jerusalem to secure the region and cut off the Ottoman forces in Mesopotamia from those in the Levant and on the Arabian Peninsula. The capture of Gaza, which dominated the coastal route from Egypt to Jaffa, was a first step towards these aims. Lines of communication during the stalemate from April to the end of October 1917. The EEF and the Ottoman army improved the lines of communication, laid more railway and water lines, and sent troops, guns and ammunition forward to defend the front lines, while the Ottoman lines of communication were shortened by the retreat across the Sinai. The EEF advance across the Sinai Peninsula into southern Palestine lengthened theirs, requiring a large investment in infrastructure, since a brigade of light horse mounted rifles, or mounted yeomanry, consisted of about 2,000 soldiers requiring ammunition, rations and supplies. This was a major undertaking. By March 1917, 203 miles of metalled road, 86 miles of wire and brushwood roads and 300 miles of water pipeline had been constructed, and 388 miles of railway lines laid at a rate of 1 kilometer a day. The railhead had been 30 miles from Gaza, but by mid-April the line had reached Deir el-Bila, with a branch line to Shell al completed. Since the Egyptian Camel Transport Corps alone could not support a large offensive in advance of the railhead, horse and mule-drawn wagon trains were established. Supply columns were designed to support military operations by infantry and mounted troops for about 24 hours beyond the railhead.